So we get into the
Right.
house, and I was searching the man's closet, a young man, and I pull out a backpack. And in the backpack, I pull out tape, plastic bags, some rags, and I'm thinking, this is his go bag. This is the bag that he probably uses to offend in person. And then the last thing I
Right.
pulled out was a pair of very soiled underwear, which was odd. And as I'm trying to
Okay.
figure this out, we have a forensics team going through his phone, and they go, "Hey
Yeah.
guys, you need to see this."
Hello, hello. Welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome to the Kathy the Panda podcast. I'm your host, Kathy, your friendly neighborhood bipolar girl just finding her way through life. If you haven't already, please subscribe on YouTube. We're new on there. Follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating and drop a comment on whichever platform you're on. Okay, I have to be honest. I am obsessed with crime novels and true crime shows. And there was actually a point in my life where I genuinely considered becoming a PI. So today I get to sit down with someone who actually lived in that world, not on a screen, in real life, and for 24 years. So my guest today spent 24 years inside the FBI, white collar crime, counterterrorism, gangs, public corruption, crimes against children. He has seen the parts of society most of us only encounter through a screen. He was a SWAT operator, a firearms instructor, a tactics instructor. It's the kind of resume that sounds like it belongs in a movie script. Seriously. But here is the twist. Before any of that, he spent 12 years as a pastor leading a Baptist church in Western New York. Imagine a man of faith who somehow ended up recruiting informants, interrogating terrorists, and walking straight into danger for a living. And now, freshly retired, he's putting it all into a book filled with the moments that were too strange, too intense, or also too funny to leave out. So, my guest today is Eric Robinson. Eric, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kathy. I go on podcasts in part to promote my book, but mainly just so I can listen to people say really nice things about me in the intro. So that was one of the better ones. So thanks.
Well, awesome. And well, it was all the truth. But yeah, you have such an interesting story. So tell me, you spent 12 years in ministry before joining the FBI. Now, what made you make that leap? Because it's like really two completely different things.
My head made me do it because I enjoyed ministry. I had moved through the ranks of being a youth pastor, assistant pastor, and then in the mid 1990s, planted a church in Western New York. And
What?
we were doing great. People were coming, lives are being changed. It was growing. But I found myself incapable of separating my congregants' problems and from making them my own. So because of that,
Mm,
the stress of ministry got to me. And the
yeah.
last 2 years of my ministry, I had headaches every single day. So
Oh,
it came to
that's
a point where
terrible.
I had pushed through for so long, and I thought, I can't wait to see what my body's going to do to get my attention. Here's headaches every
Yeah.
day. How about a stroke? Maybe we'll give you a heart attack, and that'll get your attention. So I had to find a job with less stress, and that's why I joined the FBI.
It's really less. I'm actually surprised that you said it's less stress because I feel like it is a very stressful. It's a stressful job. Um, but before we jump into like your life as an FBI agent, I want to know because, like I said in the intro, I wanted to be a PI at some point in my life, and I was just wondering what unique qualities does it take to be a good FBI agent?
Well, the FBI's mandate is to work long term enterprise investigations, which means that they are going to go to the root of the problem, dig as deep as they can, and then find the full breadth of who's involved and what they're doing. So that means these cases can be a few months, likely much longer. they could be a few years long. And so there needs to
Uh-huh.
be a tenacity, creativity,
Good.
attention to detail. And for me, I found that having an openness to never getting to a place where you believed you knew the answers, but continuing to be open to further details, uh,
Yeah.
that is something that I think makes for a successful FBI agent.
Well, okay. That's pretty cool. Now, did your background in ministry actually help you in the field? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely. So I go into the FBI. I enter. So my last sermon in the church was Easter 2002. The next Sunday, I was in
Okay.
Quantico, Virginia, at the academy. The Sunday after that, I was preaching at the academy in the chapel because they didn't have a chaplain and asked me to fill in. So kind of eased me into
Okay.
FBI work. But
Yeah.
while I'm trying to wrap my head around this huge institution, 100 years old, premier law enforcement agency, and learn how to be a law enforcement officer, I'm trying to catch up to some of the other people, former cops, military in my class.
Yeah.
But by the time we got out in the field, now I had a leg up on them because I'd spent 12 years understanding people, talking,
Right.
listening, drawing people out. And while the FBI has great technology, computers, judicial process, guns, eventually I have to talk to people. An agent has to interact with witnesses, victims, informants, and even the
Right.
criminals. And knowing how to do that by sitting down with people in the church or finding ways to connect with them in messages, that definitely gave me an advantage and something I used throughout my
Yeah.
entire career.
For sure. So you talked about, you having an advantage over the other trainees because you had, really good people skills, which is a requirement in the job. So what else was kind of required of you? Like what was the training and process like to actually become an agent?
Well, the process is you fill out this super long, detailed everywhere you've been since you're 16, every job, extended family, professors, like all this stuff goes through.
Wow.
You need to be an agent, you need to have at least a bachelor's degree and then years of experience outside of college. And then an
Okay.
applicant coordinator looks at it and says, okay, this guy, this gal looks like they might be good, moves you on to the next stage, which is you take the phase one test, which is like the SAT. And
Okay.
when I took that, I thought, well, at least I tried. came
Yeah.
came back. The FBI says, hey, move on to the next step. I was surprised. So then it's an oral exam where they're asking you, when did you overcome a problem? Talk about that situation, and then another question like that. Written exam,
Okay.
fitness test. I was in shape, so no problem there. Physical,
Yeah.
background check, and polygraph. And even though I was a pastor and lived a clean life, man, that polygraph was awful. It's the worst. Just soaked in sweat for 2 hours. And
That's
the
cool.
polygrapher is saying, like, well, let's try this again. I'm having some issues where we're not getting definitive readouts on you. And then finally he goes, well, we're having trouble with this question of whether or not you're an agent for a foreign government. And I go, oh, okay. If that's the question, then put myself at ease. And I finally got through it.
Okay, okay. That's cool. Now, what are some of because I imagine being an FBI agent, it's so filled with interesting cases and like adrenaline rushes and stuff. That at least that's my idea from what I've watched on television or read in novels. But what are some of like the craziest things you saw working in the FBI?
The craziest thing I ever saw working in the FBI is something that you probably don't want me telling on your podcast. So I'll tell a separately crazy thing.
Oh, you're good.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Is
So,
this is this information going to be in your book as well?
oh yes. Oh yeah, it's in the book.
Okay, go for it. I've read. I'm firmly sat on my chair. I'm
Okay.
ready.
So this is a story that agents tell stories whenever there's downtime and sometimes people are like, "Hey, man, this is the craziest story," and I'll say, "All right, I'm gonna let you finish," and then I'll tell mine, and it always is the craziest. So
Okay.
years ago, we have a search warrant. We're executing a search warrant and arrest on a man distributing child pornography. So we get into the
Right.
house, and I was searching the man's closet, a young man, and I pull out a backpack. And in the backpack, I pull out tape, plastic bags, some rags, and I'm thinking, this is his go bag. This is the bag that he probably uses to offend in person. And then the last thing I
Right.
pulled out was a pair of very soiled underwear, which was odd. And as I'm trying to
Okay.
figure this out, we have a forensics team going through his phone, and they go, "Hey
Yeah.
guys, you need to see this." And at the same time that's going on, he's being interrogated and he makes a startling confession. And it all came together. He was a coprophage. And so everyone in your audience can learn what the term coprophage means. It's someone who
Yes.
eats poop.
Oh my goodness.
So
Okay.
those items in the backpack were what he used to go to public toilets to stop them up, and then what he referred to as poop harvesting. He would then take strangers' defecation and save it for himself for later. And that's not the end of the story. He would also
Okay.
put it in saran wrap into a mold and put it in his freezer so that he might introduce it into himself on the other side.
Oh no. Oh my goodness.
That
That
is
definitely
that's the
crazy,
wildest. Yeah.
sir. Oh, okay. Well, I'm also curious because you were hesitant about sharing this particular story, which I understand because that's insane.
Yes.
If I was working that case, I would lose it. But what was the other story you were gonna share instead of this one?
Well,
If I hadn't said go ahead.
well, okay. So for me, it wasn't so much crazy. It was kind of wild. It
Okay.
was different than what we had run into. While working in the Toledo, Ohio office, one of my colleagues had a case on a bank robber who had
Okay.
done some violent overtaking the bank. So it wasn't a note like they were pointing guns at people, had done a series of bank robberies, and
Yeah.
now SWAT was called in to effect the arrest. And because this guy was so violent, had guns, had been to prison, said he wasn't going to go back. Okay, now SWAT's got to be there. So we we were tracking his location, found out he was coming down. He had gone up to Michigan. We called the Detroit division, said, "Hey guys, can you take him out?" And they try to pull him over, and he starts buzzing down the highway, 120 miles an hour. So they just let him go. We're set up and ready. we we go to his condominium, which had 8 units, so 2, 2, 2, 2, and
Okay.
we cleared his apartment first before he got there, so we could know it was safe. We staged 3 guys up on his landing. He was up on the top, the second floor, and they were there to make sure he
Okay.
didn't get in. And then when he pulled into his parking lot, he goes in that front door, and then 4 of us, one of them was me, slid in to be ready for him to come out. So hopefully he was just going to give up. So
Yeah.
as he goes inside, we hear our buddy say, "FBI, show me your hands." And rather than show him his hands, he showed him his back, bolts down, and comes out the front door. He looks at the 4 of us and decides to play Red Rover and just starts to bolt towards us. My
Oh
buddy
my goodness.
my buddy on my right was against a wall, and he had been doing jujitsu for like 20 years, John. And
Okay.
as the guy rushed us, he placed this push kick to the guy's hip as he ran at us. Couldn't replicate that if you gave him 20 opportunities again. But a perfect kick hit him in the hip and spun him, and then we all just dogpiled. 3 out of the
Wow.
4 of us were defensive tactics instructors. We teach the other agents how to wrestle and disarm people, so that
Yeah.
that was good. This guy wouldn't give us his arms, and we didn't know if he had a gun in his hoodie, what it is. We ended up breaking his arm to get it out. Like he was
Yeah.
strung up out on something and pulling his arm out from underneath him. It just snapped. So that was a crazy episode that we had that we don't normally get into those.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite action packed, I would say. Um, okay, so one of your stories that you shared with us just now, is that one of your award-winning investigations or just one of the crazy things that you've encountered? Because I'm curious about your award-winning investigations as well.
Yeah. So no, that won no awards. That was just SWAT being called on to take care of a violent guy. Unfortunately, we were there for it. I worked
Yeah.
I worked two investigations that were honored with the Attorney General's Award. One in Chicago that was a civil rights investigation that was very significant, and then there was one in Toledo, Ohio that I kind of piggybacked my buddy Sean, like glommed onto his case and got to win. But it was a crazy case. I'd been working criminal investigations, violations for 15 years, and
Uh-huh.
and then got moved to counterterrorism. Well, I think they're probably trying to, just like when at Quantico, they're trying to ease me into law enforcement by let me preach one more time. They're easing me into counterterrorism by giving me
Right.
my first case in counterterrorism was a murder for hire. So what had happened is Sean and the team worked up a case on four men who were from India and in the United States, and they had been sending money to Anwar Alaki, who was the spokesperson for Al Qaeda. So they were funding a terrorist. That's
Right.
illegal. Sean did a great job. Real long investigation, very very much a financial investigation, and got these four men charged. One of the subjects, Yahya Farouk Muhammad, was in the prison, and then I come onto the squad. One of the inmates with Yahya Farouk Muhammad contacts the FBI and says, "Hey, this guy says he wants me to find somebody to kill his judge." So I'd had inmates informants before. I'd had prison informants, and
Yeah.
it's a pain. And
Right.
a lot of times they try to interact with law enforcement just to have fun, to have something to do. So I was suspicious, but we pulled this guy out, interviewed him. He tells us this, and we send him back in with a recorder, which is dangerous because, if the recording gets found out, that's going to be trouble for him.
Yeah.
We're recording against someone who's already represented by an attorney, so there's legal issues. Maybe
Oh,
there might be dirty correction officers who tip it off. So all this stuff is very touchy. We send him in, and the guy goes to our subject. Hey, remember that thing you talked to me about a couple of days ago? Tell say it again. And he says it again. So we have on
oh,
tape.
okay.
Now we have on tape that he wants his judge killed, and his reasoning was if his judge gets killed, then he'll get a more lenient judge, and then he can get out. And now that things are out in the open, he's not just funding Al Qaeda, he's going to kill as many people as possible. So he starts talking to the informant about wanting to build a terrorist training camp, wanting to blow up bridges, wanting to go to the Mall of America with a rifle and kill as many people as possible. And he's on, and we're getting this on recording, which is very useful for us.
Yeah.
So the informant goes to uh, our subject and says, "I know a guy. It'll cost you $1,000 down, 10,000 total, and call this number. And the code phrase that you want to hire him to kill someone is, I want to buy a puppy." Now, what's great about that is the informant was just a middle Ohio redneck, like, but he was brilliant because
Yeah.
this devout Muslim man would be very unlikely to have a dog because that's just not something Muslims do. They consider them dirty.
Yeah.
And so he calls a phone number, which is for our undercover employee, an agent, and he tells him, "I want to buy a puppy." So they go through the motions, discuss that, and he then is instructed, the undercover, to meet with our subject's wife in Chicago, which is another thing that a devout Muslim woman wouldn't do, to meet another man, you know, just by
Yeah.
herself. And she gives him $1,000. A few days later, um, our undercover contacts the inmate and says, "Hey, have your guy have me, tell your guy to have his wife meet me again." And so he meets her again in Chicago, and our undercover shows him this picture, which is purportedly his judge with a gunshot hole in
Oh,
his head.
okay.
It wasn't. It was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the judge's face, and our photo department mocked it up. And when you're showing it on a
Yeah.
phone, okay, if you're just doing this, you don't have time to scrutinize. And the wife's like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh." So with that, and with the recordings, we had firmer charges. So not only the funding terrorists, but also trying to kill a judge.
Yeah.
Yahya Farouk Muhammad ended up pleading guilty and got 27 and a half years in prison for that. And we tried to charge the wife, but she was smarter than
Yeah.
us. As soon as she saw that, she went to her attorney, and the attorney contacted the Chicago FBI and said, "Hey, something's happening. There might be a judge who's been harmed." And she was wise enough to try to get out of it that way.
Oh my gosh. So all the other things or evidence, quote unquote, that you had against the wife as well for paying the down payment and all that, meeting up with your undercover agent is not enough to get
It
her behind bars.
it's not. The prosecutors were great on this one. They were willing to try to push forward, but I already knew what was evident here is we could not find, even though we executed a search warrant to try to find more details, you had to
Yeah.
have knowledge or show that she had knowledge of
Yeah.
this is to kill a judge. And
Right.
a court may have found her guilty. It was more likely that they wouldn't have. And
Yeah.
what's amazing is the prosecutors were willing to go forward if there was like a 50-50 chance, and they usually don't do that. Um, but
Yeah.
it was under 50% that we'd get her.
Ah, I see. I see. So 27 and a half years. What year was this case um
Oh, let's see,
done?
20. Oh my gosh, 2018 maybe 2017.
A little bit. Still a bit of
I
time
know
there,
he's
yeah.
he's going to be there for a bit, and when he gets out, he will be deported to India. So you
Ah,
you don't
okay.
have to worry about him, Kathy. He's not going to get you.
Awesome. Okay, so what is it actually like? So, like I told you earlier, I am like so scared of criminals and bad people, and just I would step on a person's foot accidentally, and I apologize profusely, and I can't imagine what goes on in the minds of criminals that they can think of harming other people, like at extensive ways. I'm like, I can't imagine hurting anyone. But what is it actually like to interact? Because you have the social skills to kind of talk to people and kind of read people and understand people. What is it like to interact with criminals of in the society, like on a, I would assume, daily basis or like frequently at
Frequently,
least?
yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's eye opening because those aren't the people I grew up with. My
Right.
dad would talk with me when I was a pastor, and he's a believer too. But he'd say, Eric, some of these things you're saying Christians need to do, you got to understand you're isolated. You're with a homogeneous group of people who, all believe the same thing. There's more to life out there. I get in the
Yeah.
FBI, and the old man was right. So,
Yeah.
I'm interacting with runaway teen girls who are prostitutes. That's not something
Mm,
I would see. I'm
yeah.
sitting down with gang members, and it opens your eyes to say, not that it excuses the violence, the prostitution, the drug sales, but here's a gang member in Chicago who has limited options in life. maybe not much of an education to even know what else is out there. They want to belong to something that's human. The gangs
Uh-huh.
are the most obvious choice. They may need protection from other violence, and so now they go to that. So those types of things make it understandable. And so, you look at someone, even these sexual predators, interacting with them, they're disgusting, they're terrible, but when you encounter them, they're already full of shame. And so
Uh-huh.
that helps not just to understand them and to humanize them, which helps me to connect and then
Yeah.
draw them out and then hit them harder because I get confession. Um,
Yeah.
it, it just allows you to do your job more wisely because
Right.
if you just look at them as monsters or
Mm,
unhuman, then you're falling short of trying to understand what this actual human is doing and why.
right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. And so earlier you talked about having an informant in jail. So you worked in human intelligence and you recruited informants. What is that like? Like, how do you get someone to be on your side, especially people who are already in jail? Like, I assume that would be a little bit more difficult to find unless they want to be in the good graces of law enforcement, then they would do it.
Right. And there's two different groups of informants. There's the ones who are working off time. So the one we had on Yahya Farouk Muhammad wanted to work off time. And so yeah, he'll do a good job, but he's also motivated by the better job I do, the more time I might get.
Right.
He actually was hoping that we would just cancel his 40-year sentence. And when
Okay.
and when the prosecutor says, "Yeah, I think we can probably get 5 years off," he goes, "Screw you," and just walked away. Like gave us everything we needed, and then just being obstinate said, "Never mind," and took nothing. So so
Whoa.
there's those guys, and then there's others who are just what we refer to as good citizens. So
Okay.
this is like me coming to you. You might work in like a law firm, and we have a reason to think that the attorneys there are dirty, or you work in a business and we think there's someone who is embezzling money or insider trading.
Right.
And so now I'm going to approach you and I'm going to do my homework on you to see who you are, to see if you're somebody who's reliable, because we want to
Yeah.
get as close as we can to the needed source of information
Yeah.
without getting turned down and then the guy tipped off. So I got to look at you and think, is Kathy gonna say no and then just turn around?
Yeah.
But we look for people with good placement and reliability, and that's I found so often that's just a pitch that I would give to people, letting them know what I'm going to do for them, what this might entail, because I want them to have their eyes open to how this might be, and then letting them also know, look, at any time this takes up too much time, you feel scared, you just don't want to. Thanks for your effort, no hard feelings. And I pitched a guy once who I interviewed for a separate case. He was a witness, and I kind of
Okay.
put a little kernel into him about being an informant. He calls me back like 2 months later and goes, "Hey, tell me more about that." And I tell it to him. And this guy he was nobody. He was just an average guy.
Okay.
He was outgoing, like the mayor of the town in a sense, like everybody knew him, but he's just a normal
Okay.
person. And he ended up being probably the most productive informant in our division, of just because he loved working with me and my partner. He loved serving the United States. He thought it was exciting. He did well, and so like being good at something is self motivating. And I
Yeah.
he was just a guy, but he did an amazing job. I mean, to the point where he got so far into the clan that they gave him, one of the members gave her grandfather's like grand wizard uh, cloak to him.
Oh,
because I loved
wow.
him so much. So
Yeah.
that's kind of exciting.
Are are informants kind of given some sort of compensation when they cooperate with you, or is it just like, oh, like you said, they're just good citizens and they just try to help?
No, they're given compensation, and it's never like the guy who was very prolific. I would tell him many times, like, brother, you're not going to get paid. Like, you're earning like 550 an hour with all the time you're putting in.
Yeah.
And so some people will get paid a decent amount. And by decent, I mean like 500 bucks. But, you're
Mm,
getting $500 for 2 weeks of work. And, you know, this same guy, we sent him down to this white supremacist group, and he had to go on his own because we're not going to be there every bit of the way. And he comes back and he
yeah.
said, yeah, they jumped me because they wanted to see how I could fight. And I go, dude, I'm sorry. He goes, no, man, I crooked that guy's nose. That was awesome. Like they saw what I could do. So I'm glad that he was that kind of guy. But like that,
Yeah.
it's a little scary to say, oh man, I you are entrusted to me, and I got you into a place where you know people tried to fight you. And he's like, this is awesome.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's pretty cool. And you were a SWAT operator for what, 15 years? Is that correct?
Yes.
How does law enforcement, because we talked about earlier how you dealt with criminals and you said you humanize them, you look at them as a human being and not kind of pre-labeled as a criminal. But how does that differ from like when you deal or engage with subjects in like high pressure situations?
Well, the way that a SWAT operation would go, we would scope out the residence. We'd try to dictate time, place, circumstances. We'd have the equipment necessary. We're doing reconnaissance, maybe looking at Zillow, if the house had been on the market. So now we can see a
Right.
layout when we enter, and we're going to make mistakes too. But we're then each operator who's on that mission knows their duty and what order that comes in, what equipment they need. We've got this planned. And now when we set up on that house early in the morning, we've got the guys surrounded. We're behind
Okay.
we're behind ballistic rated vehicles, guys with rifles, lasers in the window, and
Yeah.
it's that huge show of force which some people look at and say, "Oh, it's too much or it's militaristic." That is actually giving honor to safety because the man has one choice. The
Uh-huh.
other choice is to get killed, but the one choice when
Right.
he looks out the window to see there's no way I can get out of this is to just come
Mhm.
out with the hands up. So that's still very humane the way that we
Mhm.
treat people. We don't go in and knock them around. We show
Yeah.
them there's nothing you can do. So it's in your best
Yeah.
interest to just walk on out.
Right. Right. Now, you talked about like different levels of kind of danger in your job or in your career. But was there like a time in your life where your life was actually in danger, like a very, I don't know, a very high pressure case, a very confrontational case that you had with a criminal or anything of that sort?
Yeah. So it was two years ago next week that we were called out to a residence near Canton, Ohio, and SWAT was
Okay.
asked to carry out the arrest for a few reasons. One is the terrain was difficult. So normally, uh, the squad of agents many times arrest their own people, and then if the threat level goes up because of guns, gangs, violent criminal history, whatever it might be,
Mhm.
now those are things that trigger SWAT. This guy had been violent with the police in the past. He had some mental health issues, um,
Okay.
and also he was trading in child pornography. And over the years, the FBI has looked at that as being something of a threat in itself because many of those subjects, they know this is it, and they'll either shoot it out or shoot themselves.
Mm.
So SWAT was called in for this operation. Our team leader said, "Yep, let's do it." And so we approached the residence. It was about, well, you'll see what time it is in just a second. um, we surround the residence and then on the loudspeaker start doing the call out. And it was myself and two buddies who were covering the rear and then the side of the house while everybody else was going to approach in a different direction.
Okay.
Soon after the call out, my buddy Steve on my right yells, "Put down the bat." So the subject had kicked out the window, the screen of a first story room, and had come out
Okay.
with a bat in his hand and was coming towards us deliberately. Now, if he had a gun, that would have been one command and then threat ended. But we wanted to give him every opportunity to just give up because
Yeah.
there's no way he's going to beat 15 guys, with helmets
With a
and
bat.
guns with a bat. And
Yeah.
and we continued to retreat. And I remember I got on my radio and I called for a hands team, which would be guys who were just going to come and help us grab him if he put the bat down. So
Okay.
our deadly force policy says that we can engage in deadly force if there is an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury to ourselves or others. And
Right.
in this instance, we're not it's not demanded upon us to get severe nerve damage from getting hit in the neck with a bat. We don't want to
Mm.
kill him, but also it's not our responsibility to take whatever he gives us. So we retreated probably far more than we should have until he
Uh-huh.
finally came around the vehicle to me and my two colleagues. I moved offline and threw a flashbang at him, hopefully to distract him, to just make him stop. And when I threw the flashbang, he went to the ground. And I thought, that's weird. Why would he do that? And then my mind reeled with 1,000 thoughts in a half a second. And oh, those were gunshots. And so my two partners had shot him. I looked at him and then immediately jumped on him to handcuff, and the rest of the team was there. I remember being angry that when I called for a hands team that nobody came.
Uh-huh.
And I'd asked my buddy, one of the people who shot, how long do you think all of that took? And he said, about 5 minutes. And I said, yeah, it seems like that, but I know it's shorter. And our shooting was the first in the FBI with body-worn cameras. And we went back and viewed, and it was a minute and a half. And it
Wow.
very literally seemed like 5 minutes. And I was angry that nobody came to help when I called for a hands team.
Mm-hmm.
And when I reviewed the video, it was 10 seconds, which was about the time it took to get guys together and then come to our
Yeah.
position. So all of this, like, time slowed down, everything came to a point, and I went to my Garmin app later to see just how things were going with me, and
Yeah.
you can tell the minute
Mhm.
we got into that deadly force encounter because at
Yeah.
11:58 my heart rate goes from maybe 100 because I'm doing work to
Yeah.
178 beats a minute. And then you saw what had happened after that. It went straight down because
Yeah.
the body said, "You're in danger. I'm going to give you some juice because you're going to need it."
Yeah.
Okay, threat's over. Now let's get back to our normal work and go on from there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
another thing we saw in that video was aid was rendered within 17 seconds, which is remarkable. Our team did such an excellent job of handcuffing him, searching him,
Yeah.
and then simultaneously shirts getting cut off and tending to his injuries along the way.
Yeah.
The last gift that he gave us, well, his last words as he charged were, "Kill me." and he did end up dying. And the last gift that he gave to the operators tending to him with their hands soaked in his blood was that he was HIV positive.
Oh,
But everybody's okay.
wow. Okay. Wow. That's okay. So, just a quick question because you mentioned earlier that you joined the FBI because you wanted, because it was because your previous job as a pastor was very stressful. Now, I want to ask you, was that job not stressful for you? I mean, I saw your Garmin report,
Yeah.
but I also kind of want to ask because every chance I get, I like to talk about mental health. So I also want to ask you, like, how did you mentally deal with the constant threats throughout your career?
So the stress, yes, of course there's stress, but the stress was different and I could let it go. I could work a
Yeah,
case, finish it, move on to the next case. If there were victims, and again, I'm working with children who are being harmed. It wasn't my
yeah,
place to deal with them. Like I could want
mhm,
to, but that wasn't my job. And it actually would have been inappropriate if I tried to engage more with the victims after conviction, after trial.
right,
And so that was so much different than ministry where, you come to me and you go, "Hey, I've got mental health issues. I'm struggling with depression." And that doesn't go away when I give you Bible verses and we meet once. And so those things carried on in the FBI. Yeah, I showed you there was stress. And I showed you how that stress went like straight up
yeah.
and then down. Um,
That's fair. Yeah.
and, and the way that agents deal with those traumatic events like that is we talk about it. And
Mm,
and this is what's crazy is we'll tell these stories and they are survivor stories. And they
uh-huh.
sometimes they very literally are where like one of the stories guys tell are like, "Hey, remember that time on SWAT where two of our guys went up to the third deck and one of them ended up stepping on the subject who was hiding underneath clothes in the pitch black with a loaded shotgun in his hand." And everybody laughs. And that guy could have been killed, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
So now it's funny. But that's how we deal with it of you're kind of laughing in the face of death because we're here, we got through it, we survived, and because we
Mhm.
did, let's just bring it out in the air and laugh about it. Or here's this very disgusting story, you know,
Yeah.
where you can say that's disgusting. I'm like, yeah, I lived it. I was there. I had to deal with that
Yeah.
firsthand. But now I tell that story to you, and it brings it into reality. I think
Mhm.
rather than just getting stuff down of like, oh man, the horrible things I've seen. I'm not telling anybody.
Yeah. 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 For sure. So, speaking of kind of sharing stories, now you have a book that you have written. And I just wanted to ask, what inspired you to write your book and what can readers expect from it? Because from all the tales that you've been sharing with me, I'm like, I want to read that book because, like, you have a lot of interesting stories to share.
Well, what inspired me was my wife, who has been marketing authors for 14 years. She and her
Oh,
company, Weaving Influence. And I'm nearing retirement, and I say to her, "What should I do?" And she says, "You should write
yeah.
a book." And I think, okay, well, let me try. Because I like to write, I like to tell stories. And I sat down at the computer and they just start coming out. And I start
Wow.
writing. I think, let me start with how I think the book should open. And I write about that investigation. And I go, oh, I got to tell this one next. And I start, and it just goes. And
Yeah.
I feel like I can tell stories well, but I can get on the phone and call any buddy of mine and say, "Hey, off the cuff, tell me a great story." And any agent I called would tell you a great story because there's like
Wow.
you take out all the boring parts of like, the 7 months it took to finally get going and
Yeah.
arguing with T-Mobile about subpoenas getting returned, and you just get into the highlights, and those are all great stories. So when people read my book, they will see what it's like when a Baptist pastor who's never handled a gun gets put in the FBI for 24 years and gets to be part of some remarkable investigations. And what I like to think is in there is that there's a sense where, Kathy, you read it and you talk about how you want to be a private investigator. I think you'll read it and go, that was amazing. And I think I could have done that because I'm nobody special, but I got to be part of some special things. So I
Right.
think that readers will, other than the part about the guy eating poo, will go, hey, I
Oh,
can
yeah.
relate to that.
Fair enough. So you mentioned that you're retired. What do you miss most and what are you happy to leave behind?
Easy, easiest question I've ever been asked. The people, the people are great. The best people
Uh-huh.
I've ever met are in the FBI. Dedicated, creative, intelligent, um, just wonderful people. And being around some of those good folks is what I miss. And the action was fun too, but I also am glad I don't have to be in the action anymore. And
Yeah.
what I'm glad to be away from is it. I, I'd get any agent on the phone right now, and they could tell you the same thing. Getting rid of my bureau phone, being constantly on call, going to a 4th of July party, and always having in the back of your head, there's a 7% chance I'm being called out today. Like, you never know.
Uh-huh.
So,
Right.
being like, now I go to a 4th of July party and I just enjoy myself. Uh,
Enjoy. Yeah.
I go to bed and I don't worry about a midnight call out. So, those
Yeah.
were exciting times, but it's just good to be away from that.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. Well, Eric, this is honestly officially one of my favorite episodes I have ever recorded. It was so fun and interesting. And I feel like with your stories, I was able to satisfy, the way that I love crime and, crime shows and crime novels. And I'm like, speaking to a person who actually lived in that world is just like, because I've never spoken with anyone who had like firsthand experience with like solving a case or being involved in like award winning investigations. And I feel like it's super cool. So like before we wrap up, is there anything you kind of want to leave with our listeners, like a final thought from everything you've experienced over your career?
Uh, I'll say this, and I would say this to you too, Kathy. If anyone has any thought of joining the FBI, I would say it's the best place to work. It's like not even having to be an agent. So some people are not compelled to that, but there's so many professional support staff roles where you
Right.
you're part of what's going on. You're not getting guns pointed at you. You're not breaking bank
Yeah.
robbers' arms, but you are part of solving these issues, and agents get into the FBI for that purpose.
Uh-huh.
And then you can have analysts and operations specialists who are getting into the FBI for the same reason. They're just not wanting to necessarily be in harm's way. Maybe they're not called
Yeah.
to it, but they get to be part of that system they can tell stories about too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually super cool. I don't know. It might be too late for me to be a PI, but I do love that idea still. And kind of like, I love games like Clue, where you kind of solve mysteries and
Yeah.
stuff. So that's super fun for me. Um, but also, before I let you go, I would like to give you this opportunity to tell everyone listening where they can find you and how to get your book. Is it already released? Like, is it on Amazon or is it the release is coming up?
The release is coming up. Right now, we're scheduled
Okay.
for October. My wife's company is set to
Okay.
publish it right now. This is, I guess, a reminder that I got to email the FBI once again. They have the book at the moment to review and
Okay.
make sure I'm not telling state secrets, which I'm not.
Right.
Again, I'm
Okay.
telling stories about men who eat poo, not, tradecraft.
Yeah.
So the book is set to come out in October. If folks want to follow me and follow along for when the book is going to be released, they can go to my
Yeah.
website, which is preachertobreacher.com.
All right. And you're also on socials, I believe. We follow each other on Instagram.
I believe we do. You can
Yeah.
so for 24, well, not 24 years because it wasn't out, but for years I had social media only for the purpose of following bad guys and seeing what they're up to. I
Oh.
retire. My wife says, you need to get ones in your name now. So who knew that underscore Eric underscore Robinson would be available on Instagram? But it is. And you can see me
Heyo.
there. You can see me there or type my name and FBI into LinkedIn and you'll see this face.
Okay, awesome. So your information will be in my show notes. Yeah, I am looking forward to that book because, like, we have had a taste of your storytelling from this podcast, and I know there's so much more that's gonna be in your book, and so I'm super excited. Yeah, Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a wild, fascinating, and genuinely fun episode to be part of. I have no words. Like, it was such a great conversation.
I appreciate it, Kathy. It's great to have a chance to tell these stories with you.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, to those tuned in, as always, thank you for spending some time with me today. Again, if you enjoyed this episode, I know I did. Please subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating, and drop a comment on whichever platform you're on. So I want to know because Eric shared some of his craziest stories with us. So, what was the craziest story from this episode for you? I know mine, and it's a poop story. So, yeah, I just want us to keep this conversation going. And yeah, that's all I've got for today. Until then, sending love, life, and hope your way. Bye.